Well, welcome to the Mustang Genetics and Behavior at the EQUUS Film and Arts Festival, hosted by myself, Harper, and with Robin Kelly of the Lenore. And so I think to begin with, let's let our panel first introduce themselves, and then I'll get us rolling. So with that, I want to hand the phone over to you.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Anderson. I'm representing National Mustang Association in Colorado. TJ Holmes from Basin.
Dusty Pearson.
Dusty, you're going to have to put the mic closer.
And I want to say TJ Holmes runs a beautiful operation with her support of the Spring Creek Basin Mustangs in Discipline Valley, Colorado. And Dusty Pierce is a researcher and generalist. And so anyway, welcome. So I think what I want to do is to begin with myself, Harper, and I did a film, and it's called Mustang of the Caracas Mesa, a history of the hickory Mustangs and Mustangers. And it takes us back 50 million years so that we understand the history of where EQUUS develops came. And then it takes us through all of the breeding that has occurred since 6,000 years ago. So very complicated when we start talking about our Mustangs, so I'll try to make it simple and just begin with my Mustang named Rambo. Rambo was gathered on the Caracas Mesa by Dan Elkins, that's also featured in the film, and he did this by bait trapping. And this began in 2004, so it has been introduced to our government and to our the world for quite a number of years. And so anyway, I went out to the Caracas Mesa to see firsthand what bait trapping was all about, and spent a couple of nights observing Dan Elkins' trapping of the Mustangs. And little did I know that I had witnessed the capture of my own Mustang. And so I had no idea. And then 2 years later, this Mustang comes up for adoption. And not only for adoption, but he had become a third strike horse. And so he was on his way to slaughter or to be bought by who knows, whoever. And so anyway, I saw him. He was showcased by the Hickory District as a pack horse. And so I adopted him, but I wanted to find out who he was. And how is his history associated to who I am? And so I learned that we had quite a bit in common. Not only was he had childhood experiences in the Hickory and Carson National Forest, but I also played there when I was a child of 6 years old. So anyway, I sent his DNA to Texas A&M, and then poor guy, I had to pull out his mane and tail hairs. The first time I did it, I didn't know what I was doing, and sent the wrong hair. You're not supposed to send the body hair, you're supposed to send the hair from the mane and tail. Poor Rambo. Anyway, he came back as a Galiceño, and he also has a breed marker of the cream draft and the fell pony. And so through all of this, I did make a close friendship with Dr. Gus Cothran, who was the renowned foremost equine geneticist back in those days. Now so much has happened. But anyway, the Galiceño is from the Guarano horses of the Celtic Spain in 2nd century. And so that was fascinating to me. But as I delved in further, I met more people, and an incredible woman by the name of Sarah Annan has also increased my knowledge about Rambo. So a Galiceño, if I had a picture, I want you just to imagine you've seen a horse, but the Galiceños are not very tall. They're barely usually over 14 hands, and their muzzles are thin, the nostrils are wide. They've got the hooked ears, they've got a narrow kind of a chest, so when you look at one that's right in front of you, it's got kind of an A-frame. They've got a round hind quarter and a low tail. And so all that was so great, and I got a hold of the Swanee Mustangs of the Swanee down in Florida that they did send back and said, well, there's some things wrong with him being a Galiceño that we can register, we can take him as an appendage source. And so what I found out though from Sarah Annan, she said, go down and take some measurements. So I took some measurements of his, between his ears, and it was 3 inches. That's the first point. Then she analyzed the space between his eyes that were quite wide for a Galiceño. And then she also noticed his chest. But she said, go take a measurement and understand how tall he is, and if his shoulders and his hindquarters are equal. That will help you understand more that you have a square horse. Now, I don't know precisely if I have a square horse, but what is really fascinating to me is that she's taught me that not only is he an ancient horse of Celtic 2nd century Spain, but he also is very well a conquistador horse that might fit a conquistador mill that the conquistadors wore back in the 15th century, 16th century. But the tie now will end with New Mexico, in northern New Mexico, and what we know about the world in Spain in the 2nd century, in the 800 years before it was taken over, from the Muslims. And then the point is that the very self-same cavalries that were the Moors that invaded Spain before it was Spain, it was Hispania, are the self-same horses that we are seeing now that are cavalry of the New Mexico Wars rode as well. So that brings that all together to tie us into how important they are to us. So with that, shall we hear a little bit about traveling and people coming to America, waiting for what we think we might know?
Quite by accident, working with people like Bob Browning and Dan Elkins, I started doing research on horses and when they first were being trained and how they were being trained, this sort of thing. So in the beginning, around 50 million years ago, the horse developed on the North American continent. Sometime between then and now, it went the wrong way across the land bridge and ended up on 3 more continents. So 5 of the 7 continents have horses on them. Okay, according to what I learned in school, around 12,000 years ago, in the last ice age, the horse became extinct in both North and South America. Then the horse was reintroduced by the Spanish in the 1500s. Now this is traditionally what we have been taught. But what happened when I started doing my research is I kept coming across information that was contrary to that. So to give you some idea, we know that the Chinese did detailed exploration of North and South America starting about 4,000 years ago. They brought horses with them. Okay, they had on their ships, they had what was called a manure ship. Instead of dumping manure into the ocean, they collected it and they grew fruit trees. Chinese Navy never had trouble with skirting because they raised livings and things like that right on their ships. Very high tech compared to what was going on in Europe. So this was very interesting to me. We now have genetic ties of the Appalachian horse breed to the Chinese for the origin of the Appalachian horse. So this is something that is changing the way people are thinking. So then we had the Phoenicians coming on across the Atlantic Ocean, and they were crossing the Atlantic Ocean at the time of the pyramid building coming to North America. And we have some actual smoking gun proof of that if anybody's interested, they can talk to me after this. So after the Phoenicians, we saw the Celts colonizing the east coast of the United States and Canada and trading across the Atlantic Ocean for hundreds of years. The Celts brought horses with them. Now most of you are familiar with the Vikings And know that the night Vikings were here about 500 years before Columbus, right around the year 1000. So most people accept that. What they don't know is the Vikings brought horses with them. So we have a Viking burial in New Foundry where they found a Viking warrior buried with 12 horses. So this dates from the year 1000. So this is kind of interesting because this ties with some of the northern Indians claiming that they had horses prior to the Spanish introduction of horses. And they refer to them as being smaller compared to what came later, which would be consistent with the Viking horse. So this is just something to tantalize you a little bit about what we have been finding out. So along with this, we have come across some very interesting evidence. So they found some horses that when they carbon 14 dated them, they were only about 10,000 years old, so 2,000 years after the extinction. Then they found a bunch of frozen horses in the Yukon, and they were 7,500 years old. So now this 12,000-year-old extinction theory is becoming a problem. So since then, they have continued to do these studies, and we have horses down in Mexico that are running around 4,000 years old that they have dug up their own belly and tested. So one of them that I'll tell you about is kind of close tied to us is Navajo Lake. At the confluence of the Navajo Lake, or San Juan River and the Piedmont River, we had two major Anasazi ruins. And in those ruins, when they were doing the archaeological survey for Navajo Lake before they flooded the lake, they had to go around and check all of this. They were digging down into the ruins, and they were dating everything based on context. Context is pottery and all of that, and the way they used to date things. So in the context, they were at a level that they thought was from the year around 1100. So as they were down there digging, they dug up a horse bowl. Well, this is contrary to all science. So they decided that they had the C-14 tested to prove that it was a modern horse and that the bone somehow got down there, real deep. Turns out that the C-14 test on the horse bone came back in context of the year 1100, 400 years before Columbus. So we have a lot of evidence that the horse never was extinct in North and South America. So this is very important for something, and it's something I've been working on to prove. And we have a lot of evidence, and it's something worthy of a lot more study.
Thank you. Do you have any questions on that?
Sorry, did you want to wait until the end for questions?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I'll give now the microphone to TJ.
Yes, I'm not going back 50 million years, or 400. Although it's fascinating. I'm not totally sure what Laura really wants me to talk about here. I've been out with the Spring Creek Basin Mustangs for about 23 years, following them intimately for 17. And so I know genetics of my horses based on sires, dams, grandmas, aunts, uncles, great-grandbabies, that kind of thing. So I'm going to go completely off of what she said. One of the important things to talk about for Spring Creek Basin is that we're very small. It's 22,000 acres. High desert, what you guys are used to down here. We, highest of the high desert, we're probably 6,500 is like our high point. Not a lot of trees, not a lot of water. We have a lot of vegetation, but not Anyway, so our AML, our appropriate management level, has been fairly small. And I'm not going to get into this is the number, this is the number, this is the number, because if I ask every single one of you, you come up with a different number of what that number is. But the point is, Spring Creek Basin cannot sustain a large number of horses because the herd management area is small and our herd consequently is small. So what we do for genetic viability and variability is we introduce horses periodically to ensure that it's not the same horses breeding each other over and over. We've had 4 BLM introductions in Spring Creek Basin since the late 90s. The first were stallions. I was originally told that they came from Wyoming. I learned a year or 2 ago they came from Salish Basin. In 2001, BLM introduced three horses, and they were mares because the stallions didn't work out very well. They apparently, whether they were from Salish Basin or Wyoming, they wanted more than what they had, so they went after rancher mares. Anyway, so the mares worked out better. So 2001, 2008, and then here just a couple of years ago, 2021, we did another introduction of mares. And they've all been young, about 2. Last year, 2021, we had 2 long yearlings and a 2-year-old mare. So they're out there doing very well. But we do that so that our genetics have some outside influence, even though they've been from Sandwich Basin. Did I say that already? All of our introductions have been from Sandwich Basin. Even the stallions, apparently, even though I thought they were from Wyoming. We have a lot of grays. Gray is the dominant color in the Spring Creek Basin. Just so you know, if you breed, any color and any other color, you're going to get gray in Spring Creek Basin. Just because you guys are looking at me like you're really serious. Thank you for laughing. Thank you for laughing, because but I do have. Well, anyway, so I don't want to talk too much about the colors and all that kind of thing. Gray is our dominant color. Of the introductions. BLM, in addition to the BLM introductions, there have been introductions by settlers there to improve the genetics of the Spring Creek Basin herd before there was BLM management of that herd. So we're talking, anywhere from 40 years ago to before that. I have the good fortune to know a man who just turned 90 last year, who was raised in my house that I live in out there, that's about 130 years old. He remembers horses being rounded up from ranch horses' foals. And I've talked to a couple people who remember at least one herd, high dollar horse that came by train, and they turned him out with the mares. So we've had a lot of that. So our horses are a mix. BLM's storyline, tell me if I'm going over what I need to talk about, is that somebody up in Montana stole a bunch of cavalry horses, headed south, dropped horses here, dropped horses there. Disappointment Valley has long been known as an outlaw hideout. A bunch of gas-given some man's kid, robbed right bank, hid out with some of the early Disappointment Valleyans. So we've got some of that going on. DNA testing of our horses has come back to a lot of Morgan Thoroughbred previously, I think. I don't know if that's still the case since we've had some of the Sandwich Basin introductions. But I know that people who have adopted horses have done some of the DNA testing with Gus Gothran, and they've come up with horses related to Icelandic horses, to warm bloods, to anything you might think of. So I don't know if that's, I never know how to say it, but I don't know if that's our horses trace into that, or if that's because those horses are, in their genetic makeup, not as pure as anything, because I think they've come from a mix of places and sources. And that's pretty much what I was going to talk about. Okay. If anybody has any questions about, if anybody has any questions about behavior, that's kind of my thing, because I've been out with them for so long with these specific horses. but I can tell those at the end if anybody has one.
Excellent. It's so interesting that I'm just going to say when we think about genetics, because if you look at the genetics of our horse, it traces our history. You cannot separate the horse from the history of humanity. And with that, let's hear about our Mesa Verde horses, and then I'll tie in a little bit about our Hickoryas with your horses.
All right, I'm going to read you guys a history of the Mesa Verde horses. Horses have roamed Mesa Verde for at least a couple hundred years, long before it was declared as a national park. Presently, at least 9 small bands of wild horses live in 4 or more canyons on 3 or more mesas in the park. Water sources are rare, becoming non-existent with years of drought. People had inhabited the green mesa top since 7500 BC. Basket makers in the ancestral Pueblans, building rock shelters in 750 AD. By 1300 AD, the nomadic family groups of the Ute tribes migrated from this Great Basin into the Four Corners region. With the explorations of the Spanish beginning in 1604 from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and north into Colorado, the Utes acquired the horse and the mobility to hunt, raid, and migrate. The Ute Mountain Ute tribe claims they have had horses long before the 17th century, probably before the Columbus time in the 15th century. By 1776, Ute tribes had highly developed traditional horse use. Ute people became the people of the horse. Horses escaped and proliferated in the land. The Old Spanish Trail, a trade route between Santa Fe and California, used by pack trains in the late 1820s, provided new opportunities for trading, looting, immigrants, and escaping horses. By 1870, gold was discovered in the southwest mountains of Colorado, and the Burnett Treaty of 1873 was negotiated, which resulted in the ceding of the San Juan and La Plata Mountains by the Ute to the U.S. government, and the Ute Reservation was restricted to a strip along the southwest borders of Colorado, including Mesa Verde country. But Mesa Verde, the green table, had no rivers, no streams. It is high desert, dry plains, dissected by canyons that make topography look like crocodile skin from above. The people, the wildlife, the free-ranging horses were dependent on springs or seeps, or on the ability to travel steep sandstone canyon trails to reach water far below. I'm going to give you Maestro's genetic panel from Eaton Diagnostics. I don't have Marvel. So Maestro is Marvel's dad. Marvel's down in the pens. So Maestro's genetics came as 29% European heavy horse, and of that, 5% was fell pony, 12% of that was Francis Montagnus, and 11% of that was Belgium. 9% was thoroughbred, 23% Iberian, and of the Iberian, 9% is Andalusian, 3% was Mangalaria Polistra. Did I say that wrong?
Yeah, you said that fine.
Okay. I just kind of try to merge it together and hope it sounds right. 15% is the carriage horse, of that 11% saddlebred, 4% French trotter, 13% was the North Sea, and that's the Norwegian Ford, Shetland, Icelandic, and then 11% was Near East, which is the Arabian. So Marvel's genetic ancestry report showed 9% thoroughbred. Does anybody remember Dan Patch, the famous standardbred pacing racehorse? Well, that foundation of bloodlines of the standardbred traced to a thoroughbred foaled in England in 1780 named Messenger. Dan Patch was reportedly released at the mouth of Mancus Canyon along with 50 well-bred thoroughbred racing horses belonging to Charles Johnson in the Disappointment Valley. Johnson also purchased the race thoroughbred named Jim Douglas, who was foaled in 1878 and established New World Record racing in Washington Park, Chicago in 1886. When Charlie died, his widow did not want to keep the horses, and the horses adapted to roaming free in the Mancus Canyon. Another one, Mesa Verde, let's see. The Freiberger, aka Francis Montagnus, is the source of 11% of Meister's genetics. This is the official horse of Switzerland, where it developed and can be both slim and heavy, depending on the genetic makeup. This is a light draft horse suited for both pleasure riding and drought work, and is prized for its outstanding versatile in almost all fields.
Wow, that could be, you couldn't have ended it any more perfectly. If what I'm learning about the hickory, the herd, is that they are from that area of the Swiss Alps. So if you look up in your map and remember your geography, is that you understand that Italy is bordering the Swiss Alps. And so what we're finding from Dr. Gus Cothran's research from the 2013 and beyond is that our horses are from that area. So they're coming up with this ancient breeds of the Norica, the Belgian, that's France, the Norica, and the Lusitano, that is the Italian. So if you look at Rambo and his Gallicismo, he's a breed, but his breed comes from the Garano, which is of northern Portugal, and that was Spain back in the 7th century. So it's just an incredible history lesson when you think about our wild horses and what they can do for us. I have a story also about the Mesa Verde horses in my movie, Mustang of the Caracas Mesa, and that story is that Maurice Tanner, his grandfather, Art Tanner, his father, Art Tanner, brought 150 head of Mesa Verde horses and mixed them in with the horses of Pueblo Pintado. So those horses then traveled up through, you follow kind of the Rio Grande up into the Higueria area. So you can see how all of these horses that we have in our incredible basin that are not only the Mesa Verde, the Higueria, but the important horses that are out on the reservation, and they all share that same kind of genetic markers. With that, we can start asking questions of us. I don't know where we are on the timing. It's one, so I guess we'll conclude with that, but let's do get your question. But we really want your questions. We really want to hear it. Please. Great, from the back.
Okay. Sir, I'm sorry, I don't. You were talking about how important it is to show that the horses never became extinct. Can you expand on that? About why that's so important? I don't. Yeah.
Well, right now, the management of Mustangs, they're treated as invasive species. Okay? But if you look up any dictionary definition of what a native animal or a native plant is, it started here. And we know that horses started in North America. There's no argument with that whatsoever. So, by definition, they're native. If we get that changed, it changes the way the federal government has to manage the horse. So, to some of the people who are working with the Mustang, that's a very important thing because we're no longer the stepchild. We've moved up to something with a lot more respect.
Thank you.
Don't mean to be grabbing the mic, but now we do have Joshua Nunn that's going to be nailing it down and showing how important our horse hooves are to our horse. Without a healthy hoof, you don't have a horse. So thank you very much for attending this important, I think, discussion about genetics of our local horses.